This story comes from a small mountain village called Eldridge Hollow, about 30 miles north of Portland. Population, just under 1,000. It's the kind of place where fog hangs low, where old houses lean with age, and everyone knows everyone until they don't. For nearly a century, the town's identity revolved around one name, Elias Grange. He was the village clockmaker. Elias had come to Eldridge Hollow in the 1960s, when he was already an old man, carrying nothing but a trunk full of tools, a strange brass pocket watch, and a reputation for perfection. He repaired every clock in town tower clocks, pocket watches, even the little cuckoo clocks in the general store. The townsfolk adored him for it. But what made Elias famous wasn't his skill. It was his clocks. Every year, just before Halloween, he unveiled one new creation, a masterpiece unlike anything seen before. Some were small enough to fit in a hand. Others filled entire rooms with intricate gears and moving figures that danced or chimed in haunting harmony. They called them the hollow timepieces. The strange thing was, every year, without fail, on October 31st at exactly midnight, all the clocks in Eldridge Hollow, every single one, would stop for one full minute. And when the minute ended, the clocks would start again, perfectly synchronized. At first, people thought it was a tricksome, elaborate stunt Elias pulled for attention. But even after he died in 1984, it kept happening. His apprentice, a quiet man named Thomas Vale, took over the shop. He swore he had nothing to do with it. Yet the tradition continued. Every Halloween, for 60 seconds, time itself in Eldridge Hollow froze. At first, people joked about it. The local diner sold midnight freeze milkshakes. Kids would dare each other to go outside and watch the clocks stop. But that changed one Halloween night in 1995. A boy named Peter Langdon didn't come home. His mother said she saw him standing in the street when the church bell struck 12. Then everything went still. No sound, no wind. Even the trees stopped swaying. When the minute passed, Peter was gone. His flashlight lay in the middle of the road, still on. Police searched for weeks. They found no footprints, no signs of struggle, no trace of him. After that, most families stopped celebrating Halloween altogether. They stayed indoors when the clock neared midnight. And as the years went by, the story of Elias Grange turned from a local curiosity into something darker and unspoken superstition. Then came October 31st, 2024. A young woman named Lydia Vale, Thomas's granddaughter, had returned to Eldridge Hollow after years away. She inherited her grandfather's workshop, a narrow 2-story building with tall windows, 100 ticking clocks, and a thin layer of dust over everything. Lydia wasn't a believer in curses. She was an engineer, pragmatic, logical. The stories were small-town folklore, she thought. Old minds making ghosts out of coincidence. That evening, she worked late in the shop, trying to repair her great-grandfather's final unfinished clock. It was a massive thing 6 feet tall, built of dark oak and bronze. Its gears were exposed like a ribcage, its pendulum still, frozen mid-swing. As midnight approached, Lydia noticed something odd. The air in the shop felt thick. Not hot, not cold, just dense, like the whole room was holding its breath. She checked her watch. 11:58. Outside, the village was quiet. Too quiet. The clocks around her ticked faster for a moment, syncing with each other, building to a rhythm like a heartbeat. Then, as the church bell began to toll 12, every sound vanished. Ticking stopped, the pendulum froze. Even the flame in her oil lamp stood still, motionless in mid-flicker. Lydia felt the air shift. Not wind more, like gravity bending sideways. Then, from the street outside, she heard something faint. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, walking on cobblestone. She moved to the window. The world outside was gray, drained of all color. Shadows stretched across the street like melted wax. And there, just beyond the lamppost, something was walking. It wasn't clear at first. It looked human, but its body seemed out of focus, like it existed slightly ahead of the present. As it passed beneath the light, its outline shimmered, as if it were made of dust suspended in water. In its hand, it carried a clock, one of Elias's old designs. Lydia tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. Only her eyes followed as the figure stopped directly in front of her workshop door. Then, for the first time since childhood, she heard the faint tick of her grandfather's brass pocket watch, the one that had been buried with him. Tick, tick, tick. And from outside, that same slow, steady voice spoke through the silence. The minute is owed. The second hand on her wristwatch twitched. 11 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds. Then the clocks began to move again. When she blinked, the street was empty. The lamplight flickered. The footsteps were gone. Lydia exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath the entire time. But something else was different. All around the workshop, the clocks were still running, but they no longer ticked in unison. Each one now beat a fraction of a second late, as though something had slipped into the space between their moments. And when she turned toward the great oak clock, the one she'd been repairing, she noticed a new name carved into the inside of its brass frame. Peter Langdon. Lydia didn't sleep that night. She sat at the workshop table with a pot of coffee and a growing list of questions she couldn't explain. How could Peter Langdon's name be etched inside a clock built 50 years after his disappearance? How had the clocks known the exact moment to stop? And what was that voice, the one that said, "The minute is owed"? By sunrise, she'd convinced herself it was exhaustion. Stress, maybe. An auditory hallucination. But when she returned to the oak clock, something new had appeared. The pendulum was moving again, slowly, independently, and on its brass faceplate, beneath Peter's name, a second line had been carved overnight. Elias Grange, 1901 to 1984. She touched the engraving. The metal felt warm. Lydia backed away and left the shop locked. That afternoon, she drove to the town archives, a converted library that still smelled of mold and varnish, found the original blueprints for Elias Grange's workshop. The archivist, an old man named Carter, who'd lived in Eldridge Hollow his whole life, helped her dig through yellowed documents until they found a folder marked Grange Estate, 1984. Inside were sketches of a massive clock, the same design Lydia had been restoring, and a single handwritten note from Elias himself. It read, "To halt the hour is to hold the hollow. Time will take one for each minute borrowed." Lydia stared at the words until they blurred. "Does it mean anything to you?" Carter asked quietly. She shook her head. "It sounds like nonsense." Carter gave a dry chuckle. "That's what we all thought. Until Peter." He told her a story she'd never heard before, about how during the early 1900s, before Eldridge Hollow even had paved roads, the valley had suffered from something locals called the still hour, a minute of complete silence that came once a year, always on All Hallows' Eve. Animals froze, clocks stopped, and afterward, something would always be missing. A child, a drifter, a stranger just passing through. No one remembered them clearly, like they'd been erased from time itself. When Elias arrived in 1962, he found the town terrified of the tradition. They begged him, the clockmaker, to find a way to fix it to keep time from stopping. He agreed. But whatever he built contained that silence. It didn't destroy it. It trapped it. Lydia left the archive with her hands trembling. She wanted to believe it was superstition, but deep down, She knew. The voice she'd heard, the figure walking the still street. It hadn't come for her yet. That night, she returned to the workshop, determined to finish the oak clock. Maybe, she thought, if she could repair it completely, she could control the curse, end it once and for all. As the evening drew on, thunder rolled across the hills. Rain tapped the window panes like impatient fingers. The clocks ticked louder than they ever had before, as if anticipating something. 11:58. Lydia wound the oak clock one last time. The gears clicked into motion. The pendulum swung freely for the first time in decades. 11:59. The ticking stopped. She stood there in absolute stillness, heart pounding, lungs locked, waiting. The air shimmered again. It seemed suffocating pressure, like the seconds themselves had solidified. Then, the workshop door creaked open. The same figure stepped inside, its shape clearer now, its features sharp. It looked human, but wrong. Its eyes were hollowed bronze dials. Its skin moved like layers of clockwork, thin metal shifting under translucent flesh. In one hand, it held Elias's brass pocket watch. In the other, a tool, a winding key. It turned the key slowly, the sound echoing through the silence. Tick, tick. The creature tilted its head toward Lydia and spoke with a voice that didn't sound like just one person. It sounded like many, layered and distant. The clockmaker paid in hours. The apprentice paid in years. What will you give for your minute? Lydia tried to step back, but her feet wouldn't move. Her muscles strained against invisible weight. The entity reached forward and pressed the key into her chest. She gasped, but there was no air, only the metallic click of something winding inside her. Then, without warning, the clocks all around the room began to move again, every single one ticking in perfect, flawless unison. Time resumed. The creature was gone. The workshop door was open to the cold morning air. Lydia stumbled to the mirror near the stairs and froze. Just below her collarbone, faintly beneath the skin, a small brass dial turned slowly with every heartbeat. Her reflection blinked a fraction of a second too late. And behind her, the great oak clock ticked one final time, its faceplate now etched with a third name. Lydia Vale, 1994-2024. In the weeks that followed, Eldridge Hollow fell silent about her disappearance. The workshop was boarded up again. But on the next Halloween, when the clocks froze at midnight, the townsfolk swore they saw a new shadow moving among the still air. A young woman walking beside the old clockmaker, winding the gears of the world 1 minute at a time. And for exactly 60 seconds, the world forgot how to breathe.